Welcome to The Conversation, where we put real life in conversation with our faith, where it's safe to wrestle, where it's safe to bring our whole selves to God, and even if we're not sure about God. Our last episode was all about loneliness, this epidemic that is affecting countless people across our country, across our world. And it was a enriching conversation, but you can only do so much in half an hour. So today we wanted to not just acknowledge the problem, but talk about a potential resource, a tool that you can use in combating your own loneliness, of helping other people who might be experiencing loneliness, of like just building meaningful and lasting community. And so we've asked today Debbie Teike to come and visit with us. Debbie, would you introduce yourself?
So my name's Debbie Teike, and I'm actually by training, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I've lived in Columbus now for about 30 years. I'm a mom and a grandma, and, I don't know, I think have a pretty full life. And and I am the author of The Art of Invitation.
So what is The Art of Invitation?
Well, the art of invitation is really a relationship building approach. So sometimes people say it's communication, but it's really broader. It's really a relationship building approach. And honestly, sometimes people think, I don't really need that. I have relationships. Almost everybody, even people that are lonely, will be able to pick out people that they feel that they're in relationship with. So oftentimes people think, well, I'm not really sure I need to have a relationship approach. But I bet you, of your listeners, everybody has a problematic relationship.
Sure. Or
like in loneliness, maybe times when the relationships that they have aren't very full or meaningful, or they're episodic, or, so there are times. And what I ended up tripping over, I think, is a really nice intersection of the life of faith and some best practices, because I am a social worker and I was interested in both.
An overlap of skills.
Yes.
Created in a unique way to help people grow. And I know I have lots of relationships that I could stand to be better. In my day job, I'm a pastor. And so I have relationships with, hundreds of people through that. And some of them are really strong, and some of them can use probably a little strengthening. Even my marriage and my kids, I think my relationship in those places is strong, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't be improved. And that's just me mentioning the relationships that I think are strong. I'm not going to bring up all the ones that may not be perfect today. So what nudged your heart to do something like this?
Well, there was kind of an event that happened in my life where someone else's approach to people and my approach hit head on.
Okay.
And it was a conundrum for me. It was kind of like a big deal. And on that particular day, I said, I'm going to be invitational. I'm never going back, which is really the most ridiculous thing, because I think anybody that knows me really well knows I do have a lot of opinions, and I like to share them. For example, my kids, I used to say, you should have a green vegetable every day. That sounds so stupid, but when you don't want to eat a green vegetable, it is, they don't want to hear it. And the whole idea of this invitational, the word invitational, and it's funny because in the art of invitation, people are like, what is that? Is that like writing is it calligraphy, writing nice invitations? So there is some confusion about the title, but the art of invitation is just that. It becomes an art. It's not a science.
So what are we inviting people into?
Yeah, into relationship, into belonging, connection, mattering. The research tells us that we can have food and shelter, clothing, the basics, but people don't thrive if they don't have meaningful relationships. And that usually is the common denominator that makes for well-being and actually a long life. Those of you that are listening that want to live a long time, work on your relationships.
Because they talk about loneliness taking years off of our lives, being the same as smoking a certain number of cigarettes. It just really can harm us. So you mentioned this conflict that you had with somebody, and you said, that's it, I'm being invitational and I'm not going back.
Right.
What was the other option?
So that was interesting because that kind of started this deep dive. And what it turns out, I learned that it is being presentational or confrontational.
Okay.
So oftentimes we don't think about those choices because if we are wanting the best for the other person, sometimes we think, well, I have to tell them the truth,
Yeah.
right? Or I want to share this piece of information. And we're not paying attention to the relationship.
Yeah.
So I a lot of times want to help people to understand that there's sometimes a green, a yellow, and a red light. And so sometimes, and you know, we're interested in the life of faith, and I oftentimes think of this verse from Isaiah, and it says that Jesus opened not his mouth. And I think of that a lot because obviously you're going to find, you know, I like to talk. And
That's why you're here.
Yeah, there you go. But there are times when silence, holding back is the best thing for the relationship. So when is that? How is that? What I ended up unpacking is kind of some simple tools, some simple concepts to help people get a little bit better grasp.
Yeah. Well, I can see that like in my own parenting. Sometimes I want my kids to do the right thing, eat that green vegetable, and I just want to tell them to do it.
Right.
And kids do not always respond well to doing exactly what they're told.
Right.
And I talk about kids, but that happens no matter our age. I'm a youngish for a pastor still. And I started in youth ministry, and doing ministry with youth is an interesting adventure. But then I also taught eventually this Sunday school class where the youngest or the oldest person was 93, I think. And the average age was probably over 70. And they were definitely not teenagers, but a lot of the same dynamics were there. So even though I like relate this to parenting kids, like we all know that adult who just will not do what you tell them no matter what.
Right.
We all know that we should be eating our green vegetables at every meal, but we don't. I had lunch today. I had an orange vegetable, but not a green one. So if someone's interested, like why would someone be interested in this? Like what would they notice? What would they hope to get out of it? Why would someone be interested?
So, you know, there's a lot of motivations why people are interested in going into the art of imitation. One is, you know, maybe they don't have a lot of relationships. Maybe they are in a place where they're kind of making a transition. People that go through a divorce, or people that are, you know, widowed or unemployed, any number of things.
Newly empty nest.
Right. And so maybe people are in a time where they're kind of thinking about, you know, branching out a little bit. There are people that are interested because maybe they have that one or two person relationship that's really problematic and it bothers them. They don't, you know, they kind of don't know what to do, and they're looking for ideas there. There are people that are just interested because they like to grow as a person, and they value the time and focus and energy toward being a better person. And I honestly think that's just a golden motivation. You know, we walk, we try to eat better, we try to do all these things for wellness. How often do we really pay attention to how well am I loving my neighbor as myself?
Yeah.
How well am I doing that? We kind of think we are.
Yeah. We all think we're a nice person.
Right.
We all think we're a good person. I think maybe these tools will help us show people and like act on some of those instincts that we have.
So one of the things that I really like as the fruit of art of imitation is it helps because of the way that we deep dive is to connect that internal motivation to the outward expression. So like the motive of the heart. And sometimes we just act impulsively because that's what we do.
Oh.
It just allows us to pause a little bit and make that connection a little easier. And that is one of the sweet spots.
Yeah, I often think, we can love somebody, but if we never tell them that we love them or show them that we love them, they won't know.
Yeah.
And even if we try to show them, if we don't show them in a way that they can understand, they still won't know.
Yes.
And so you have to put action behind that, or it's ineffective. What if I sign up for the art of invitation, decide to participate, what can I expect to get out of it?
Well, I think from the evaluation I've done, lots of evaluating of the work. The top things that people usually note is a better self-awareness, better sensitivity to where other people are, some common, like easy tool concepts to put into play. Those are common things, but I think then there are others. So the interesting thing about relationships is it's not like fixing a car, right?
Yeah.
So
I learned that the hard way.
Yeah. So you have a car and you change the oil and maybe it runs better. But with relationships and I'm going to say working on relationships is not always fast and efficient. The most efficient thing is just tell somebody the way it is. That's the efficient way. Really looking at the dynamic of the relationship and trying to love the person, as you said, where they are, loving myself where I am, because it's also not about being invitational with another. It's also understanding how am I invitational toward myself? Where's my capacity?
Yeah.
And sometimes we're stretching our capacity because we think it's the right thing to do, and it's actually maybe opposite effect.
Yeah, we think it's going to be a shortcut, but it ends up making things worse instead of helping. I remember when I was a new pastor, my undergraduate degree is in electrical engineering. And so I could do the math, I could write code, and if it didn't work, you just erase or backspace and you try again and recompile and see if it works this time.
Nice.
Which is pretty straightforward, and nobody gets hurt if you're just writing your code and you haven't published it. Nobody gets hurt by that. You just keep trying, and you can try as often as you want. But you can't do that with people. They're not always our experiments to try every 15 seconds a new tactic to get them to do what we want.
Though I am going to say, if you kind of practice some of these tools and concepts and pathways, for lack of a better word, people are kind of forgiving. There is opportunity. That's another motivation for restoring, renewing. But again, it's not always fast. Trust is built, slowly, and it's trust can be broken pretty fast.
It can be.
Right? So I think that speaks to what you're saying. Sometimes there's not a do-over.
Yeah.
But kind of there always is a do-over.
It takes time for these changes to propagate through the system. Okay. I'm going to start inviting more people into my life. I'm going to start investing in relationships. That doesn't mean your first coffee out with somebody yields a best friend.
Right.
I mean, you have to keep trying and keep investing. It's a lifetime practice, not a quick fix. Yeah. So what specifically might I learn in the art of invitation?
So there are 8 chapters, 8 focuses, and the first 3 chapters are kind of the basics. So if you get through chapter 1, 2, and 3, you've got the basics down. And then chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7, those focuses are the barriers that come up. So oftentimes we can kind of know the basics, but then we get involved with somebody who has conflicting values. They value something differently, and we don't even know that's the elephant in the room. Yeah. Right? And so then it can kind of all go south. Another thing is relational needs. So sometimes we're looking for in a relationship like acceptance or support, encouragement, affirmation. And another person maybe is really big on respect. My family of origin, they're very big on respect. So if you want to light somebody up, you disrespect them. And it's not going to go well. So, so when I know that, then my way of approaching the relationship might be a little bit different.
Well, and when we sense that we have those buttons to push, sometimes we're tempted to push them too, when we know the ones that will shortcut to a response that
when we're not our best self, right?
Absolutely.
Exactly. So then we look at the emotional awareness pieces, so emotional health, awareness, and because interestingly enough, when our needs don't get met, when, say, for example, we feel disrespected, or we feel not included, or we feel, or we have this sense of, somebody doesn't believe in us, for example, then that falls into that emotional trail. And, so it's very interesting that Art of Invitation actually started for seminarians. It was created, it was commissioned to help seminarians be able to be better pastors.
Yeah, we need that for sure.
Well, when we got to the emotional chapter, I mean, and this was a male group. I mean, no offense or anything, but it was a male group, and they were always like, what? This is kind of soft. But when we got into the material, I believe that they were like, this is so helpful.
Yeah.
And because we all are emotional beings, whether we want to kind of look at that or not, we are.
Yeah. Well, and to dig a little at men a little bit, we are emotional beings, but sometimes we've been trained or taught that only certain emotions are okay.
Right.
Like anger, that emotion we might be comfortable with.
Right.
Empathy, we might need to learn.
Right.
Not that every man is in that
Right.
situation, but stereotypically it's a way we talk.
Right. So if we have, just a real primer on kind of getting a sense of where our emotions are and kind of being more sensitive to where another person is, that can break down those barriers.
Yeah.
And then there's a chapter on uninvitational thinking.
Okay.
And so it's like, what is that conclusion that we draw that comes from what our need is and how we're feeling, and then we draw a conclusion, and how can we help check ourselves and really be sensitive to where another person might have drawn a conclusion, so that we again can break down a barrier that might be there.
Well, and there's a curse of knowing, like we think we know the answer already, and so we don't ask the question.
Yeah.
And that happens in the way we treat people. It happens the way we treat scripture even. We think we know what the scripture says, and so we read through it quickly. We think we know this person already and what they need, and so we rush to give them what we think they need, or tell them what we think they need, rather than listening and coming alongside of.
Exactly. And then the last part of we kind of look at, well, what happens if we're making all of the best effort and it's still not working? Then what? What is that path of peace?
Yeah.
What is the path of peace?
I'm glad you have that one in there.
Yeah, because I mean, as I said, sometimes it's a long haul.
Yeah.
I honestly can tell you in my own personal life, I started this in 2010.
Okay.
So it's been a while. And, it's kind of been my pathway. It helps me to be grounded.
Yeah.
Helps me when I get lost. And I have seen in a lot of people, they'll tell me, anecdotally, hey, this is what I used that for in this relationship, or I still remember this, or I was able to approach this group because of that. So, I just feel like anybody that's interested will learn something.
Awesome. So how does it work? How do you get involved? What do you do? What's the logistics?
So it's pretty simple. It can be self-taught. I think you have an online audience, so the online audience can do it by themselves.
Okay.
The beauty of the art of invitation, however, is that when you have the ability to connect with another and just kind of like talk about what you learned and all that, breaks down loneliness, makes a connection. I actually just listened to a webinar on homeless folks and loneliness.
Oh, wow.
Just
Perfect.
this morning. And it was so interesting because they were saying that like just having a relationship with a barista sometimes can be significant.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that interesting?
That is very interesting.
So I don't know that we have a perfect venue or spot for anybody that wants to do Art of Invitation, but I'm going to say that learning it and being able to apply it and talk to it is maybe a growth edge for some people, but would be really helpful.
Yeah.
So I think we talked about maybe the opportunities we'll be developing.
Yeah. And if you're interested in opportunities, let us know, and we can make sure that they happen and they get created.
So, so there's a workbook online that you can get through Amazon, the old Amazon, and it's. I think you'll put a link on your website.
Yeah, we can do
right?
that. We can do that for sure.
And then there's a video series at theartofinvitation.org. And so it's www.artofinvitation.org. And you'll see in the tabs on the top, it'll have a video series, and they're just free and accessible.
Perfect.
So each video has a corresponding page in the workbook. So you just kind of can go through it. There are 8 chapters. If people decide to go together as a group, then usually, we just tackle a chapter at a time. Some people can roll through it. And I know of a group that took 9 months to a year to go through it. So
you can go deep, or you can kind of glean what you want and go maybe a week per chapter, or sit down and read it if you absolutely love it, and just knock it out in one sitting. And so the videos are free at theartofinvitation.org.
Right.
And then Amazon.com, just search for The Art of Invitation, and the workbook will come up if you want to use that.
And there's a facilitator book and a participant book. So if you want to get a group of people together and do a project, it is really designed to be self-contained for people to be able to just pick up the facilitator book and roll with it. What I've found is that most people like to talk to somebody about how to do that. So my contact information is also online.
Oh, wonderful. So we don't have to be an expert like you're an expert to be able to do this. I wrote the book and I've learned a lot. I still learn the principles of it. Yeah. I still get, short and impatient and want to present and confront. Sometimes I'm not the best listener. I think this is something I won't accomplish in my lifetime, but I've certainly, I think, improved my sense of awareness and ability to navigate things. I feel pretty, I don't know. I'm not going to say I'm great at it. I'm not big on these speakers or people that say, I used to be this schmo and now I'm really great at this. But I will say I embrace the concepts personally. Yeah. Well, I know you're still out there doing great ministry and affecting lives and the mental health venue and all kinds of places every day. So I'm sure these skills are critical for all of that you're doing. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for watching this. I hope you've heard some things that are interesting. And again, it's free to go check out the videos and start learning and start chipping away at the loneliness in our world. It breaks my heart to see it, even though I know I experience it the same way a lot of people do. But we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Visit us at theartofinvitation.org or theconversationcommunity.org. We'll see you later.